All right, welcome back. So let's talk about just mainly where in the U.S. are the highest risk for these mass wasting events. Well, it's really anywhere that has significant slopes and mountains are at risk, right? Because again, you need some inclined topography. So anywhere there's significant slopes, hills, wherever, mountains, there's a risk. But there are some places that are a little bit more than others. There are some factors expected to increase mass wasting activity, and this can be outside of the control of just the area itself, but due to urbanization and development. So living and building in mass wasting prone areas. So if you destabilize slopes and hills and mountains, you could increase those factors. Tree cutting in mass wasting prone areas or wildfires, and that can all be due to changing global climates, and sometimes with changing global climates, some areas due to climate change will become less moist, some will get more moisture. So again, like I said, kind of last video, what is mass wasting prone area now might not be in the future, or vice versa. But the short of it is basically anywhere there's kind of mountains or hills. That's where it's going to happen. So, not always, but that's where it's going to happen. So, what you see here is a map of the U.S. All these different colors. The red indicates high incidence, where landslides actually occur in high amounts. So, guess what's right here? The Appalachian Mountains. Guess what's right here? The Rocky Mountains, all through here. Guess what's over here? Mountains on coastal California up into the Cascades. Guess what's up here in Vermont, New Hampshire? Mountains. All right. Guess what's here? Well, not mountains, but there are some cliff faces from rivers sometimes, where rivers kind of cut through an area and leave a canyon, some steep walled canyons where you can get some sort of falls and other material. But again, most of what you're seeing is due to some sort of mountainous activity, not all. The yellow is high susceptibility, where it's a high chance of getting mass wasting events, but low incidence. So it doesn't really occur. It could, but it doesn't happen too often. The orange is also highly susceptible, so it definitely could, but it's kind of a moderate. And again, red is high incidence, high susceptibility, high incidence. So just to point out again, so we look at this big area around the Appalachian Mountains, and then we see the Rocky Mountains. So what I'm going to show you is just something to think about. All right. So here's a map of the U.S. This shows elevations. This doesn't. I know greens and browns kind of are indicative of vegetation or desert, but that's not what this map shows. So this map shows elevations. The lowest elevations are going to be in your dark green, so along the coast. The highest elevations are going to get into your browns and then eventually to the blacks. So the highest elevations in the U.S. are in the Rocky Mountains and over in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So that's where you get your highest elevations. All right. So the Appalachian Mountains, a big mountain chain along the East Coast, it's just not very high. They're wide and long, but they're just not very high in elevation. But in any case, so let's kind of think about this. So there's the Appalachians and there's the Rocky Mountains. Again, let me go back one slide. And the reason I'm talking about this is, why is there just so much landslides in Appalachia, which are smaller mountains vertically, so not as much slope, but yet the Rocky Mountains are so extensive and actually run all the way up into Canada, yet if we go back, it's much less than the Appalachian Mountains. Something interesting to think about. Well, not only is it slope, what's also that? What's the most important factor? What's the most important factor? Begins with a W. That's correct. Water. So now let's look at a vegetation map, a satellite image of the U.S. What do you notice a lot more over there than you do over there? A lot more green. Why? A lot more water, a lot more precipitation, which will allow for a much more diverse green area. Over here, much less precipitation. So you are getting much more precipitation in the Appalachian Mountains, which is why there's a much higher incidences of mass wasting events in the Appalachian Mountains. The mountains aren't steeper. They're less steep. They're not taller. They're not higher in elevation. They're lower in elevation than the Rockies, but there's just so much more water. So they get so much more precipitation. Get much less in the Rockies. actually rather dry. If you if you ever go to Denver, it's very, very dry. Yes, the Rockies get snow, and we think snow, and we think skiing, but yeah, they don't usually get a lot of it. It's usually pretty dry. It doesn't usually rain. Yeah. So anyway, just something interesting to think about. Mass wasting events can be linked to almost all other hazards: earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, wildfires. Any of these may cause or at least facilitate mass wasting events to occur. Before we move on, let me give you another part of the super secret code. It is the number 8. You got me? The number 8. One more time, the number 8. But in turn, mass wasting may also cause other hazards. Mass wasting event can block a river or stream to create a flood. A mass wasting event can happen underwater or even above water, right next to a large body of water. And in either case, that material flows into or below the water, can create a tsunami. So other hazards can create mass wasting events, but in turn, mass wasting events can create other hazards. Oh my goodness, what a fun cycle. Yeah, so this is just a fun little, I guess, fun little thing to think about. So there was a wildfire. So this is in Springville in Utah, 2019. This was a rock fall. Why? Because this rock got some vertical air. So there was a wildfire in the area, and it burned vegetation and loosened the earth. So all these houses were sitting here, and if you look in the background, there's kind of a, just on this slice, there's a big mountain range, a steep mountain range. So the wildfire burned the vegetation, so you don't have the vegetation keeping stuff in place. So a loose boulder on the mountainside came kind of rumbling down. So this was in Utah, so we're looking kind of the Rocky Mountain region. Just a fun little example of what might occur. Thankfully, no one was hurt here. No property was severely damaged. But I do want you to watch these videos on this, just to start to get your brain wrapped around kind of what can occur. It's not always these big giant landslides. So I just want to talk to you about something fun. In this case, a mass wasting event. It's kind of fun and or funny before we start to get into the seriousness of things. So when we come back, we'll talk about mass wasting events in Arizona. Some specific mass wasting events in Arizona, which are on the smallish side. And then as we continue on in this unit, we'll talk about some of the worst mass wasting events that have ever occurred. So we'll pause here. Again, watch that rockfall stuff, and I'll see you back here in just a minute.